On this month's In the Life, America's angriest activists.
The backlash is going to happen against the system.
Why are we still doing this? Has nothing changed in the last 15 years?
A more perfect union in Quebec, and the Cuban defector who crossed over.
When you make the decision to leave your country, you are well prepared to always start over, to keep moving ahead.
All this and more on In the Life, America's gay and lesbian news magazine.
They're so brilliant, so charming, so happy, so gay.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Arcus Foundation, Nebraska AIDS Project, the Pride Foundation, University of Nebraska Medical Center HIV Clinic, William J. Resnick, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Welcome to In the Life. I'm Bill Brochtrup from NYPD Blue. In the community, as on In the Life, we spend a lot of time talking about activism, about working for political equality, for social acceptance, and for visibility. We have acted up and fought back and demanded our human rights. And we have lived our lives, anticipating and creating the day when defending them is no longer necessary. On this episode, conflicting voices from the front lines of activism, some of whom question what exactly we're fighting for and against. Also, the politics of daddyhood. Nomad diva Joy Cardwell travels out and about from Arkansas to China. And what's on Harvey Fierstein's mind as he goes back to Broadway?
I may be ready to join those nutcases who claim HIV does not spread AIDS.
But first, Larry Kramer. Once called America's angriest AIDS activist, he's famous, and in some circles infamous, for co-founding the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, which stormed institutions from the New York Stock Exchange to the FDA to the Catholic Church. Longtime ACT UP member Ann Northrup reflects on her colleague and friend.
Faggots, ACT UP, gay men's health crisis, the normal heart. All controversial, all confrontational, all groundbreaking. But that's Larry Kramer. He pushes the envelope and pushes us higher and better. That's why I love Larry. That's why I've worked with him all these years. And now at age 67, Larry is continuing to break barriers, continuing to ruffle feathers. In December 2001, Larry became the oldest person living with HIV to have a successful liver transplant. So organ transplantation is his new crusade. And he's gone back to work on his major novel, The American People, that he's worked on for 2 decades. Tonight we hear from Larry himself. Kramer on Kramer, his legacy and his life.
I have a 45-year-old man's liver, and my surgeon, in all seriousness, says you are as old as your liver, so I am now 45 years old.
Not bad for a man who in summer 2001 was suffering from end-stage liver disease triggered by hepatitis B. After 7 long months on an organ donor waiting list, Larry got his new liver in December 2001. He knows he's one of the lucky ones.
I cannot tell you how many emails and calls I have had personally since the operation. How do I find a liver? How do I find a hospital? It's going to get worse and worse because as HIV infected and hepatitis B and hepatitis C infected people live longer and longer, there's going to be more of a demand for organ transplants. And we're just perched at this crucial moment on the seesaw here, and I'm afraid we're going to fall off unless we set up a system of, in your face like we did with ACT UP.
We must act up, fight back, fight AIDS.
ACT UP. To many, Larry Kramer was ACT UP. But long before AIDS, Larry was making waves with his written words.
Morning, Miss Brangwyn.
Morning. Yes, of course, there is that to consider.
His career took off early when he won an Oscar nomination for his screenplay adaptation of D.H. Lawrence's Women in Love. His first gay novel appeared in 1978. Its then shocking title and sharp-edged take on sexual promiscuity caused the gay literati to cringe. But Faggots became a bestseller and has never been out of print, and he soon began work on another book project.
It's called The American People. It's basically a history of America told through its diseases and its discriminations. And it's also a history of homosexuality in America. And I've been working on it since actually before AIDS came. And of course, AIDS usurped what the book was about.
For Larry Kramer, AIDS changed everything. In 1982, he helped start New York's gay men's health crisis. Of course, he then fought with the organization and left it. In 1983, he wrote a scathing call to arms in the New York Native newspaper, blaming the government and gay men for ignoring their responsibility to fight the oncoming plague. And he kept writing. His 1985 play, The Normal Heart, was a clarion call for action and abstinence.
Now it's a history play. People want to know what happened at the beginning to get us into this mess, and that's basically what Normal Heart is all about, the very first days of AIDS. In this country, anyway. It's being done all in the rest of the world, in small countries, remote places, places I've never even heard of, where you never see the royalty checks from, but I don't care.
Now, Felix, you understand that your body no longer has any effective mechanism for fighting off anything.
Well, I'm gonna beat this thing, you know?
Good.
No.
That's the right attitude.
No, I mean, I'm gonna beat this. I've always been lucky.
Good.
I guess everyone says that. Well, I'm gonna be the one who beats it. I wanted my job at the Times and I got it. I wanted Ned and my God, have I given it to him?
I don't know.
Can he catch it from me now?
We just
Did he give it to me?
Act up! Fight back! Fight AIDS!
Then, in March 1987, came ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. Its co-founder, chief cheerleader, and rabble-rouser was Larry Kramer.
Why ACT UP was so successful? Because everybody was terrified. Everybody was terrified of dying, which most of them did. And everybody was young and angry with a lot of energy, and that's why we were able to mobilize so many people. That's what ACT UP at its height was all about, fighting to save our own lives.
The temperature's rising, it's getting warm. The party's over, so we went to storm the NIH. It's just war, storm the NIH for the sick. Storm the NIH for the poor. Storm the NIH. Storm the NIH. Storm the NIH.
The backlash is not going to happen against the activists now. The backlash is going to happen against the system.
Healthcare is the right. Healthcare is the right.
People think all you had to do was go out there and scream and yell and you'd get your way and get your drugs. It wasn't that at all. ACT UP had a cadre of experts that we could send inside to the meetings. And once we got our seat at the table, we knew how to use it very well. And you know, we did. Those drugs are out there now because of ACT UP, solely because of ACT UP. And the drugs that are keeping everybody around the world who can afford them alive are there because of us. And all illnesses have profited from the anger of ACT UP.
Today, many of those former activists are on the inside, working within the system. To Kramer, that's understandable, but it's not enough.
I don't see any gay activism, and I don't see any AIDS activism. And the organizations that represent us in Washington are pathetic. We have a paltry, maybe 5, 10 people in Washington fighting for us. So while we criticize HRC, and they're eminently criticizable, we can't really condemn them because they're not really getting our support. Until we are strong enough to have enough lobbyists in Congress, as the Jewish people do, as the Catholic Church does, as the automobile industry does, we are not going to have any rights. If every city with a gay population in this country had a fundraiser once a year and raised $200,000 to fund their own lobbyist in Washington. Imagine how many lobbyists we would have. We would have a huge network of lobbyists, hundreds of them.
For his part, Larry Kramer can find solace knowing that his words still resonate. His follow-up to The Normal Heart, The Destiny of Me, opened in London in the summer of 2002.
It was just such an unbelievable treat for me to have this play, I don't know what to say, re-recognized. It got wonderful reviews in New York, but it was never done anywhere else in the world, and I've never been able to understand why. Every single actor in it was phenomenal, and in many instances much better than the ones we had here in New York. And the audience was just like this. You could have heard a pin drop the whole time.
And Larry continues to hammer away on The American People, the book he began more than 20 years ago.
I was terrified that I would be dead without finishing it. And now that I have been granted more life, that's number one on the agenda, to finish that book. I started out to be a writer and not an activist. And I want to be taken seriously as a writer. That's the thing I want to be remembered for when I die. That's what this attempt to write this gigantic novel is all about. I want to be remembered as a writer who was an activist, not an activist who was a writer.
In August of 1988, I was shooting the Ryan White story. And we were on the set one day, and somebody was interviewing Ryan. I heard him say, well, one time somebody spit at me and called me a fag. I said, it's unconscionable that anybody would treat this young boy like this. And then I said, they're treating my friends like this. People say that this is a compassionate country, and yet my friends were being largely ignored and they were dying, and it wasn't okay with me. So I needed to stand up and be counted. I needed to say something about it, and it started from that moment. I'm Judith Light, and you're watching In the Life.
Our next two stories focus on people who are creating unorthodox but very real families of their own, from Daddy and Papa bringing new faces to the Castro, to couples forming a more perfect union in Quebec. The New York Times publishes same-sex wedding announcements. New Jersey couples sue to get marriage licenses.
We just want what everybody else has access to, which is marriage.
And Bravo airs a reality series on gay weddings. Perhaps the hottest and most controversial gay issue today is the right of same-sex couples to marry. So far, the greatest progress in this country can be seen in Vermont, which in July 2000 became the first state in the Union to pass a law allowing gay and lesbian couples to enter into civil unions.
I've done about a dozen civil unions, and my husband, who's also a minister and a justice of the peace, has done close to that himself. I'm going to be boogieing on upstairs.
Minister Beverly Boak was the first to perform a civil union church service in Vermont.
I'm confident that the majority of the people in my church think it's a wonderful thing and are very proud of the state of Vermont for being open and affirming and progressive enough to allow for civil unions for gay and lesbian couples to virtually marry.
Howard Dean, the governor of the state of Vermont.
What the Civil Unions Bill does is to say that a gay person who is not allowed to get married has the same rights that I do in terms of if their loved one is hospitalized, if somebody dies and there's some property in joint name, insurance rights, all these things that I can get because I'm married without thinking about it, gay people couldn't get in our state. Now they can.
Governor Dean believes his signing of this controversial legislation will ultimately be understood by most Americans.
It was history in the making. All we're talking about is equality under the law, and I believe that most Americans, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable with the gay and lesbian community, believe that all Americans should be equal under the law. That's the right thing to do. That's what we've done in Vermont.
Since Vermont's historic act, similar laws have been passed north of the border, in both Nova Scotia and Quebec.
We met at a bar downtown. I say it was the 22nd, Roger says it is the 23rd, but we met before midnight, so my story sticks. Well, from there on, we just started to build a life together.
Theo Wouters and Roger Thibault of the Montreal suburb of Pointe-Claire are like any old married couple.
In December, we'll be 30 years together.
On the 22nd.
On the, on the 23rd. It's quite a life. We didn't have time to think or to see the time passing. It's just recently, since that fight against homophobia arrived, that we realized that we were together for so many years.
That fight against homophobia took the form of two neighbors harassing them over several months, resulting in a very public court battle. In May 2001, thousands marched in Pointe-Claire in support of Roger and Theo.
Because of our visibility as an example, we decided to go for the civil union.
After 30 years together, Roger and Theo publicly tied the knot, becoming the first couple to take advantage of Quebec's new law.
We had about over 200 people in the courthouse.
I
don't want to cry, my makeup will run.
People were very impressed. Many people said you look like two kings.
Or two queens.
I was not there. It's something we will never forget.
Every member of the parliament voted in favor of this law.
As Minister of Justice, Paul Béjean's mission has been to abolish all distinctions in Quebec law regarding sexual orientation. Quebec is the first North American society to do this.
I think very special because, except in Netherlands, it's the only place in the world where we have exactly the same rights and obligations for everybody.
Le monde fantastique où la paix et l'amour universel règnent. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
It is not surprising that such progressive legislation has passed in Quebec. This fiercely independent province of 7 million people draws hundreds of thousands of visitors every summer for a full week of gay pride events in Montreal. In 2006, Montreal will host Gay Games 7.
Yes, here, no discrimination is allowed. Love reigns.
But beyond the festivities and economic benefit, the gay population in Quebec is also seen as an important constituency by politicians.
Families are not exactly as they were in the past, and we have to show opening to these new realities.
Michel Lincoln-Etier is justice critic for the Liberal Party, which supports civil unions.
It's a good thing. We're talking about equality. So l'Union Civile clearly demonstrates Quebec is open, so I think it's a good thing.
Since the definition of marriage in Canada is determined by the federal government, the most Quebec could do for its gay citizens is to sanction civil unions.
So what we did, we left them the copyright of the word marriage. We call it civil union. We thought that Vermont had a good idea naming it that way.
But some gay couples in Quebec feel that civil unions do not go far enough and have moved to challenge the law directly on the issue of marriage.
During the 90s, we began to see things happening in the States around the question of conjugal relationships and marriage and full citizenship, full rights. And we saw nothing happening here, so we decided to do something about it. On the 14th of September, 1998, we filed our first suit against the government of Quebec and the government of Canada to get a marriage license. Actually, we went and tried to get a marriage license, and of course, they refused us.
What Michael and Renee seek with marriage is legal recognition of their relationship beyond the borders of Quebec, something not possible with civil unions.
It's pretty good. It, however, is not marriage. It isn't recognized outside the province of Quebec.
If you stay in Quebec, that's fine with the civil union. But if you go outside, if you want to change, move somewhere else, it doesn't do anything for you.
It's not equality, that's what it is. I think the point that we try to make all the time is that marriage is the gold standard of relationship recognition, and we don't see why we should be taking gold plate when we can have gold.
But some in the gay community did not agree.
When we first started this, we got a lot of opposition, of course, from the straight community and religious people who called us doing the devil's work and whatnot, but also from the gay community, particularly people that called themselves queers. They said that we had renounced our radical background, our act-up past, and all that stuff.
But after a while, after it changed, people get to see, but maybe it would be a good idea if we can get married and see the advantage of getting married, you know, like financial possibilities and everything that goes between two persons.
On September 6, 2002, the Quebec Superior Court ruled in favor of Michael and Renee and gave the Canadian Parliament 2 years to change the law. The judge wrote, "The definition of marriage creates a discriminatory distinction by excluding same-sex couples. This distinction undermines human dignity and denies the applicants equal rights." Though the government has appealed the ruling, the case brings Canada one step closer to becoming the first non-European country to legalize same-sex marriage.
It's one more choice that the young people didn't have before, and it's an opportunity to do it or not do it.
You have two people that love each other, they want to live together, and their love is as strong. It's not that different. For some, it might be different, but it's not different. It's exactly the same.
I did the AIDS walk back in October of 2000, and the first thing I saw were people holding signs, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's people out there, you know, supporting, but it was just the opposite. There was a little girl standing there with a sign that said, "Die fags," or something as absolutely absurd as that. If she had seen what I saw, I don't think that would have been the case. I'm Larry Sullivan, and you're watching In the Life.
The closer I got to fatherhood, the more I ran across gay dads. I met divorced gay fathers, men who co-parented with lesbians, and others who had flown overseas to adopt. Almost always, becoming a gay dad required months, sometimes years, of perseverance. Daddy and Papa is a 1-hour documentary about gay men who are raising kids. And it looks at the political issues, the cultural issues, the personal issues involved in what it means for a gay man to be taking a step away from the kind of standard gay male evolution of life. The idea for Daddy and Papa came out of a dinner conversation that William, my partner, and I were having with a friend of ours, Kelly, who one night said, "I'm going to adopt 2 kids." He lives right in the Castro, in a completely childless neighborhood. I thought, this sounds pretty interesting. So I started filming him, really not knowing where it was going. And then as the project evolved, I ended up filming some other families, and then eventually coming to turn the camera on myself and my own family when William and I decided to take the step to adopt as well. We decided to move ahead toward adoption through the surreal and sometimes frustrating process of getting certified as foster parents. I really wanted to focus in the film on men who are making a conscious choice as out gay men to form their own families, and to look at the specific challenges which gay dads face, which are, I think, above and beyond what straight parents face and also what lesbians face. I wanted to put a face on that and demystify it.
We're getting there, we're getting there. I will.
A friend of mine said, you know, you are America's nightmare. You know, this gay guy with 2 kids, living in the Castro, that is so much what so much of this country really doesn't want to see happen.
You just can't walk into a supermarket or a restaurant or a mall or a school playground with 2 dads and a kid or 2 and expect that no one's going to pay attention. I mean, you immediately become, well, you're like us, but you're not like us. I think the face of the American family is changing. You know, there are all sorts of new families that are out there.
I didn't start off being an advocate for gay adoptions. I was an adoption advocate. There are lots of kids out there who need homes. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. I see gay families adopting as an untapped resource. More and more counties, more and more private agencies are opening their doors wide open to people who want to explore this.
Do you know we're going to be your daddies? Do you know that?
A lot of families formed by gay men are multiracial, and that brings up a whole other set of issues that kind of are on top of being, you know, gay dads. For open-minded people and people who are really paying attention to their world, the kind of cookie-cutter 2 straight parents and 2 kids model is just not really in existence.
I think the gay part of it is really not a big deal.
How many daddies do you have?
I have 2 daddies.
Yeah. You have 2 daddies?
I don't see there being nearly enough films out there that deal with gay culture and the complexity of what we're all doing. I mean, it's an entirely new culture that's just sort of blossomed in the last, 30 to 50 years and is changing really every year. And people aren't documenting it nearly enough.
Hey, this is our new reality. That's right.
It took a little over 3 years from the time that I first started filming Kelly to the time that we finished it and raced off to Sundance. Audiences responded to it really positively. I mean, from the very first screening.
Look at me!
Daddy and Papa, Shaving the Castro, and Beauty Before Age, films that I made. There's a lot of similarity in all 3 of these films in that they all deal with gay culture and gay history and the evolution of gay men's community. How am I in the mainstream? How am I on the fringes? What's my relationship like to straight people, to other gay people? How am I perceived? All of those questions are kind of lurking under the surface of all of these films. Shaving the Castro focuses on a barbershop that's in the middle of the Castro that's been there for 70 years. That started out being a typical barbershop in a working class straight neighborhood and has somehow weathered the transition to this almost completely gay neighborhood, and it's still sitting there. Beauty Before Age is a film that explores gay men's experiences of growing older. We interview people ranging from age 19 up to their late 70s about what does it mean to grow older, what's the process of aging, and how do we cope with that. So many straight people just have this very superficial view of what gay community is, and all of these films dig below the surface and get people to see it as much more complex than that. With Daddy and Papa, I wanted to tackle a more complex issue in parenting. It's very, very loaded. It's interesting, some of my closest gay friends have really distanced themselves from me since we became parents. And then I have other gay male friends who have actually become much closer to us since we became dads. And I think for them it's a sense of, hey, these guys have a family and I want to be part of a family. I want to be really involved in kids' lives.
I don't know what it feels like to not have 2 dads. I feel like I have a lot of parents and that I can brag about having more parents than other people.
I think adoption by gay men has increased a lot. At the beginning it was, 90-95% lesbians and their kids. And now it's really almost feels like half gay men. It's really changed. As a gay parent, it's kind of constantly trying to figure out where do I fit and where don't I fit, and what are the challenges ahead of me in the straight community and in the gay community? How do I navigate this? I know there's a lot of people in this country who have a lot of very entrenched ideas about, negative ideas about what gay dads are like. But hopefully by exposing people a little bit to what the issues are, they can move a little bit more down the spectrum to being open-minded. That really is one of my main goals as a filmmaker, and part of why I'm a filmmaker to begin with is to be able to look at what's happening and tell those stories and tell them in a way that both straight people and gay people can identify with them and begin to dissect them and think about it and have it have a real impact on their own lives.
Hi, I'm Miss USA 2002 Shauntay Hinton, and you're watching In the Life.
Still to come on In the Life. Miami's Queen of Clubs.
She took those indigenous sounds, but she modernized it. It's hip history.
The boys in the band become men.
It took the milieu of the homosexual lifestyle at that time and just unapologetically did a play about it.
And Harvey Fierstein acts up about AIDS activism. But first, In the Life ventures out and about with Joy Cardwell.
A week of Black Pride.
It's just another queen!
A sequel to Boys in the Band. And a hit George Wolfe musical. All this and more coming up in Out and About.
Hi, I'm Joy Cardwell. We start in Arkansas, where a group of 7 gay and lesbian residents have challenged that state's same-sex-only sodomy law. According to that law, certain acts of sex are legal for straight people, but illegal for gays and lesbians.
No one has actually been prosecuted in Arkansas in the more than 20 years of the law's history for private conduct. But we have argued, and the Arkansas Supreme Court resoundingly agreed, that this law stigmatizes gay men and lesbians in Arkansas. It brands them as criminals, and it hangs over their heads as a constant threat that at any moment they could be singled out for prosecution.
Arkansas's Supreme Court ruled that the state cannot violate people's right to privacy and tell them what they can or cannot do with other consenting adults.
Then the court went on to say, not only is this law a blatant violation of a fundamental right to privacy, but it also violates core equal protection values found in our state constitution, because it singles out only our gay and lesbian citizens.
With the overturning of the Arkansas sodomy law by the state Supreme Court, 4 states still ban only same-sex sodomy: Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. And in New York, a celebration of Black Pride. The annual week-long celebration promotes recognition of the talents, contributions, and empowerment of gay people of African descent. The events included a multicultural festival and an award ceremony. And in China, AIDS activist Wan Yanhai is free again after an international outcry for his release. Wan was held captive by China's security apparatus for 4 weeks after revealing the government's responsibility for the growing AIDS epidemic in rural China. In the Life met Wan in 1998.
I used to work in a health department in Beijing for AIDS education. So we organized a hotline for counseling of AIDS and sexuality, including homosexuality. And we also organized some salon and some seminar talking about gay rights in Chinese society. So in 1993, the government became, angry towards my work. So my job was stopped, and I was fired by the government.
Back in the U.S., another historic ruling. Washington State Appeals Court ruled unanimously that firing public employees because they're gay violates the U.S. Constitution.
In 1996, the United States Supreme Court issued a landmark gay rights ruling in which it stated a principle, a general principle, that the government can't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation without at least some sort of reason that is at least rational.
ACLU attorney Ken Cho represents Mary Jo Davis, a lesbian government employee in a Washington state hospital who was subjected to severe and ongoing anti-gay harassment. Davis was eventually fired.
The Court of Appeals made clear that the law does make it illegal for the government to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation in the employment context.
Now to a celebration of queer culture. Gay and lesbian performers gathered at New York City's Dixon Place for a month of queer-inspired experimental theater, dance, and music. Among the performers were Reggie Cabico and Eileen Cho with their Hollywood spoof, Eyes Slammed Shut.
I'm gay like Ricky from My So-Called Life!
Mark Crawley's play, The Boys in the Band, is a milestone in gay culture. It still attracts audiences more than 30 years after its controversial premiere in pre-Stonewall 1968.
The Boys in the Band sort of established me as a playwright. It was a play that came out in 1968. It caused a lot of noise because it took the milieu of the homosexual lifestyle at that time and just unapologetically did a play about it. I mean, as people reacting to people, it wasn't the big secret in the second act, oh, he's gay.
Well, how are we going to have a conversation in depth, a warm, rewarding, meaningful friendship? Up yours. Why, Captain Butler, how you talk?
More than 30 years later, Crowley's sequel to The Boys in the Band, called The Men from the Boys, premieres in San Francisco.
It's a sequel in as much as it uses the same characters and they are 30 years older. I'll be interested to know what is said about the comparison of the two plays and how the characters have evolved, either for better or for worse. And believe me, some have got worse and some have got better.
When I say one word, you say Harlem. One word, one word, one word, one word.
And in Harlem's world-famous Apollo Theater, it's the Harlem Song by gay writer and director George C. Wolfe.
They're so brilliant, so charming, so happy, so gay. As they stroll.
Let's go away.
What are you talking about?
On a plane.
I ain't getting on no plane.
The show chronicles life in 20th century Harlem through song and dance.
You shake it like a bowl of soup, yeah. You make it go loop-a-loop, yeah. You put your hands on your hip now. Come on and let your backbone slip.
The energy, history, and magic that grew out of the culturally diverse neighborhood come back to life.
He starts up Harlem.
I grew up in a small town in the 1970s. My friends and I experienced homophobia firsthand. I can remember being scared for my life, running from men with baseball bats, seeing my friends get stabbed, and being called names that I was too young to even be able to relate to. What I did know was that I was different. I felt like I didn't fit in or belong. I felt publicly ostracized and was in pain. There were no role models I could look to. No one for me to say, I want to be just like her. So instead, I turned to thoughts of suicide, drugs, and alcohol. That's why 10 years ago, when MTV asked me to come out as a lesbian on The Real World, I knew I had to say yes. I had to set aside my fear of my own safety, knowing without a shadow of a doubt that what I was about to do would help people. And it did. Visibility saves lives, helps build progress and change, and makes a difference. I'm Beth Anthony, and you're watching In the Life.
In 1993, an innovative musical sensation emerged from Miami's South Beach gay and lesbian community. A Cuban defector named Albita, with an androgynous persona and crossover appeal, quickly became a favorite among clubgoers like Madonna and Gianni Versace. Her distinctive voice and rhythms also made her a hit within the local Cuban community.
Cuando llegué a Miami, yo creo que...
When I arrived in Miami, I think it was important for me to find that I had become a way or a vehicle for the new Latino generations born in Miami, who were suddenly rediscovering their roots that had been communicated to them by their grandparents, while at the same time mixing with the sonoridades that they had been accustomed to listening to as children.
She took those indigenous sounds, what was the real rhythm and blues of Cuban music, if you will, but she modernized it. There's elements of jazz, there's elements of today. It's hip history, and that's a hard thing to find in music.
It's happened to me often that people approach me and say, I'd never listened to this kind of music before, and because of you, I'm going to start listening to it. And that's a beautiful thing, especially with young people.
I think the classic story, the one that really tells who Albita is that the day that she actually defected from Cuba, when she slipped across the border from Mexico into this country and asked for political asylum, they were playing a tribute to this daughter of the revolution who had done so much for Cuban music, was playing on the Cuban government radio over there. Obviously, the very next day, Albita doesn't exist in Cuba anymore, and it was a long time before you would hear any of her music playing on the radio again down there because of the political system.
I look at things a different way. I go through life. I am who I am, and I am what I am. I can't afford for 1 second to worry about whether or not I'm bothering someone. That's their problem, not mine.
Her willingness to take risks soon caught the attention of Miami's gays and lesbians.
She dresses in what might be considered a very mannish garb. She was breaking down whatever, old stereotypes we had here or everything, but I'm glad that there's an appeal. I think that it has to do with that raw, rich sex appeal of her voice, of her sound, of her look.
Which soon got her noticed by Emilio and Gloria Estefan, who were at the center of the Miami music scene. They had created one of the world's most formidable empires, selling more than 60 million records. After seeing her perform, Emilio signed Albita to his label, Crescent Moon, a division of Sony.
I think that is the best thing that can happen to any artist. You arrive and you find yourself in contact with the people who are at that moment the most influential and powerful, and who can produce your music.
But her bid for commercial stardom met with limited success.
I think that most people, in their minds now, Latin music fits salsa, merengue, or, Latin pop. And I think that her music goes beyond that.
But mainstream Latin audiences weren't buying her CDs, and radio stations weren't playing her music.
In the music world, especially in the Latino music world, people don't know who the songwriters are. They might know who is the most commercially in style or who is on display. It's not an easy fit for a music company when a musician proposes something artistic instead of something purely physical. I always say that if Barbra Streisand was born today, I don't think they'd know what to do with her either.
You don't ask Picasso to change his style to accommodate your decor, and I don't think that anyone should ask Albita to change her style to accommodate our ear.
I didn't do anything with Sony I didn't want to do. And I think maybe that's why they later broke off the relationship.
Unable to market her as the next Latin sensation, Sony dropped Albita.
I don't think you get scared of having your contract canceled and of having to start over somewhere else, because that happens to everybody, not just artists, but to everyone. When you make the decision to leave your country and start over again, you are well prepared to always start over, to keep moving ahead.
Refusing to get discouraged, Albita threw herself into writing and producing the music that she loved.
In order to compose, one just needs that moment of inspiration. I think that composing and creating is a marvelous thing, to feel that need to share something with someone else.
Which included performing for the gay audience that had always given her their support.
Hold on to your conkers.
Here is Albita.
As the opening act of the Human Rights Campaign's 2000 Equality Rocks concert in Washington, D.C., Albita shared the stage with Ellen DeGeneres, Melissa Etheridge, and Katie Lang.
Y fue una experiencia mágica, ¿no? Estar enfrente
It's a magical experience, being in front of hundreds and thousands of people, while at the same time knowing that you are supporting a cause.
de apoyo. Y yo creo que
I think we have to fight so that people respect more our personal spaces and civil liberties the same way as we fight against racism.
problemas raciales, ¿no? Cuando yo toco
When I play someplace and they open their doors to me, I don't ask, are you gay? Or are you from the Communist Party? Or are you from this political group? Whatever. Because I think that music is, or art is, the most universal sensibility that exists. And because of that, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what religion you are, who you sleep with, whatever you are. Art is for the whole world, and that is the beautiful thing about it.
y eso es lo bonito que tienen.
Albita is now signed with a new independent label, Times Square Records, which is marketing her work as world music.
What Bob Marley did for reggae, I think Albita does for the real roots of Cuban music. Viewing her music as world music, I think, is a smarter way to look at her music. Is it going to sell more albums? I don't know. But it's certainly a more intelligent way to view her music instead of trying to cram it into a niche where we're expecting her to be Ricky Martin, because she's never going to be that.
The new CD is called Hecho a Mano because the CD is so made by hand. It's like if you were knitting something, it's made by hand. They are all my songs, almost all of the arrangements except for one are mine as well.
Los arreglos casi todos excepto un tema.
I produced the CD. I was always there, working it out with the sound engineers, etc. And that's why we named it that way. It's all made by hand.
Así el disco porque es bastante artesanal, ¿no? Yo creo que es muy importante tener claro lo que tú quieres.
I think it's very important to be clear with what you want and to follow through with what you want, with what your heart dictates to you, what your desires dictate, and what your soul dictates. I've always tried to do that with my music. I've always tried to do what I want, and today things are more clear to me than ever.
Por hoy lo tengo más claro que nunca.
Agua con azúcar.
On the next edition of In the Life,
The Gay Wizards of Wall Street. Heeding warnings about hepatitis. And a peek up the skirt of Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
I was born on the other side of a town written to.
All this and more on In the Life, America's gay and lesbian news magazine.
I remember one of the most moving shoots that I ever went on for In the Life was in 1997 when I was producing a segment on a teen suicide, Robbie Kirkland, and I flew to Cleveland and was picked up by his mother, taken to his house, fed breakfast by her, and then she brought me upstairs to see his room where she hadn't even made his bed after a year. So it was, and then his letters that he had written and his diaries were spread out all over the floor. So it was his monument to this boy who killed himself because he was gay. And to be there in that home with that mother who had learned that and had become so supportive of the gay community, I'll never forget that day. I'm Katherine Linton, and you're watching In the Life.
and finally, when Harvey Fierstein went back to Broadway in Hairspray, he started to question how he has spent the last 20 years of his life.
As you may know, I'm back on Broadway. That's right, these shaved eyebrows are not meant as a fashion statement. Well, No sooner had I arrived in my dressing room than the requests to perform AIDS benefits began to pile up. Nothing new about that. I do AIDS benefits all the time. But the sheer number of requests started me thinking, why are we still doing this? Has nothing changed in the last 15 years? And if not, why not? Have we wasted 2 decades battling the wrong cause of AIDS? For the better part of the last 20 years, my friends and I have sacrificed time, energy, and resources to the crisis. We've raised money, performed shows, spoken out at schools, on TV, at rallies, in movies, hospital wards, street corners. We've marched and protested and screamed ourselves hoarse. We've sought out experts, trained the counselors, built hospital wards, created hospices, handheld patients, counseled families, and sewn memorial quilt panels in every city of every state of this nation. We've backroom politicians and bullied pulpits, lambasted school boards and blackballed bigots. We've written legislation and pamphlets and found funding for prevention. We've fought court battles and took on drug companies. We've smuggled meds, phonied insurance forms, bribed healthcare workers to get what patients needed. We've lectured and written about our experiences. We've buried our friends and our lovers and our family members and our neighbors. We've passed out condoms and rubbered bananas and worn red ribbons to every public event imaginable. We've held world events and out-mediated every single other disease ever contracted by man or beast. We've spread the message in all conceivable languages that AIDS is a deadly but difficult to contract and completely preventable disease. We've done all this for the better part of 20 years, and still AIDS is a day-to-day reality in our community. Am I alone in feeling like a political fool, a social fossil, and a community failure? I know folks who think that being HIV positive is cool, sexy, and desirable. I know HIV positive people who have unprotected sex with others without care or conscience. I know HIV positive people who only have unprotected sex. I know HIV negative people who only have unprotected sex. I've spoken to an HIV negative teen who only wanted 2 things in this world: to meet a nice guy and to seroconvert. Now, if these people care so little about their own lives and well-being, why should I care? I should give up my Saturday night to raise money to buy drugs for some punk who went out and got AIDS thinking it was cool? I should sign posters and theater programs for auctions to pay for the treatment of someone who continues to have unprotected sex, spreading the misery? Should I waste my time and energy fighting to keep the infecting of others with HIV decriminalized and a private matter? Why waste money buying condoms to distribute when I can't even get some of my own acquaintances to have safer sex? Shouldn't I forego all this goody two-shoe crap and just let the next generation fester on drug cocktails and slowly die? Why not? My generation has struggled and sacrificed all of these years, and we've made little difference. Why shouldn't I stop wasting my time? Or have we been fighting the wrong cause of this epidemic all along? Have we? I may be ready to join those nutcases who claim HIV does not spread AIDS. No, I don't blame AIDS on government testing or biowarfare. I believe AIDS is spread by the same killer virus that has stalked and destroyed our people for as long as we've existed. Forget silence equals death. How about self-loathing equals AIDS? Simply stated, happy people don't hang themselves, do they?
I'm Bill Brochtrup. From all of us at In the Life, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Arcus Foundation, Nebraska AIDS Project, the Pride Foundation, University of Nebraska Medical Center HIV Clinic, William J. Resnick, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.